Hey everyone, welcome to Career Journeys brought to you by Career Companion. We are here with Michael Robinson. He's going to give you a bit of an overview of how he got to where he is in his career. So I guess first of all, Michael, what do you do for work?
Yeah, no, great to be here, Sam. Thanks for having me. At a high level, basically what I do is I work in sales for a cybersecurity company. So I'm the regional sales manager at a company called Hyprfire. They're an Australian startup that does network detection and response. If anyone is watching know much about cybersecurity, that'll make sense to them. If not, feel free to do your own research. But essentially, I lead the go-to-market side of the business for our organization, managing our sales team and helping with the strategy in terms of how we can grow our business and grow opportunities.
Perfect. And I guess for people who don't know cybersecurity so well, but they've been seeing it a lot in the market, how did you pivot, I guess, into that realm?
Yeah, so I suppose that warrants taking a bit of a look back into my career. So I originally studied exercise science at uni, which I know doesn't quite translate into cybersecurity, but off the back of that, I landed myself in a sales role working for a pharmaceutical company, with the intention there to move into medical devices sales. After spending some time there, I think it was about a year and a half or so, I was with that organization. I decided that maybe this wasn't quite the right fit for me and pivoted over to SaaS startup world. So selling a marketing-based product for an Australian marketing startup. I was working there originally as a sales development representative. So basically making cold calls, booking meetings in partnership with a salesperson and qualifying inbound opportunities. After working there for a year and not seeing the avenue for growth that I was looking for, I pivoted into a US-based company called Coursera. Now they're a identity security product, which is where I sort of got my first feet on the ground in the security space, in the cybersecurity space. Our product was heavily focused on selling to people building web apps and digital products. So not so much very focused on the cybersecurity, but sort of on that periphery layer. And after spending about 5 years with that organization through various roles, originally in the same appointment business development representative role, moving into an account management role where I was looking after our current customer base and growing our revenue base from those organizations, and then eventually into a direct sales role. I ended up shifting out of that after taking some time off work, off the back of an acquisition there. I moved into a cybersecurity consultancy. I did a bit of work there as an account director, servicing enterprise customers for those that don't know, there's probably two sides of the fence in terms of sales from a security or SaaS world. You either work for a vendor, which is what I did with Auxero, or you work for a partner or a reseller. So I hadn't been on the reseller side before, and it was my first chance to dip my toes in the water of that to see if it was something I was interested in. It was a great role, great team to work with, but ultimately I found that it wasn't the quite fit for me. But the advantage and what I learned out of that was exposure to the broader cybersecurity space and a really in-depth understanding of what products fit well, how people buy products, what incentivizes chief security officers and the likes to purchase products. And I took that knowledge and shifted into Upfire, which is where I am now, back on that vendor side of sales, selling a direct product and also working with people that are in the roles that I used to be in to help them sell our product as well.
Fantastic. That is quite a journey, and there's a lot to unpack there, which is great. So I saw you mentioned that you got a degree in exercise science, which obviously has nothing really to do with sales or tech at all. Let's sort of rewind before that. In high school, did you know that you wanted to get into exercise science in uni, or how did you sort of come about that conclusion?
Yeah, look, I guess I took a bit of a disjointed path to end up where I am, as many people do. Outside of high school, I didn't really know what I wanted to do, and I took some time off before going to uni. About 2 years of time working as a labourer for a construction company, and almost went down the path of becoming a tradesman. But ultimately, after going through a bit of a health craze during that period and losing a lot of weight. I was quite overweight when I was younger and getting really into fitness. I thought, hey, I really want to learn more about this. And I could see myself pursuing a career in health and fitness. and that's how I ended up going into the exercise science degree.
Okay, perfect. And was it an easy degree to sort of get into with, I guess, how you went through high school, or did you have to do any sort of bridging courses, or how did you get into that?
No, so I managed to get straight in off the back of the ATAR, I think it was back then. I don't know what they use now, but to get into university to study exercise science, I will say that the caveat, I went to Charles Sturt University, which is out of Bathurst, so more of a regional university where you go and live out on campus there and all the fun stuff that's involved in that. But yeah, what comes with that is not the high ATAR requirements that are common in some of the more larger universities based in the city and that side of things. So I didn't do too bad. I did a good job, but I didn't have any trouble getting in because I went out there and the low ATAR requirement wasn't necessarily the driver to go out there. I was looking for something different and look back very positively on that experience.
Fantastic. And for yourself, obviously, when you went into that degree, I'm going to assume sales wasn't on your mind. Like you said, you lost a bit of weight, you got into fitness. What was your goal career-wise once you had obtained that degree?
Yeah, rightly so, mate. It wasn't really at all. I guess my original intentions and never really knowing exactly where I wanted to be, but what I thought could be a great route for me was to move into either high profile strength and conditioning coaching for athletes and sports team, or perhaps going into physiotherapy in the sports environment as well. After the course of that degree, I sort of lost the interest in going as in depth as is required to fulfill those roles in that sort of specific industry, and came out of uni with, I guess, open eyes, looking for what else might be an option for me to explore.
So then you said you went over to Ranbaxy, and if I'm correct, that's in the healthcare sort of pharmaceutical area for people who don't know. Is that correct?
Yeah, so that was my first role. Not necessarily my first role. I did spend a few months doing telephone cold calling for a contact center that worked on behalf of the Rural Fire Service Australia. And that was really where I got my first dose of what sales is like, and probably a very intense dose, given the way those call centers operate, but it wasn't too bad. But definitely something I wouldn't do long term. After that, I ended up shifting into pharmaceutical sales. So what I was looking for was that opportunity to pursue a career still leveraging my degree. So I thought if I started in pharmaceutical sales, I might eventually be able to find a role in medical devices and leverage that science background that I had to enable me to be a better salesperson in that community without having to be a specialist that's done all this additional study into becoming a physiotherapist or something like that, which I didn't really want to pursue.
And for people who don't know what cold calling is and, sales as a whole, I mean, everyone who's gone through sales, if they're going into, I guess, your sort of role, would have had to go through that cold business development. What for people out there, can you explain what that is?
Yeah, so I guess it's sort of in the name, right? So when you say cold sales or cold calling, it's typically an outbound sales motion where you're reaching out to potential customers rather than having anyone come to you, and you're reaching out without any sort of warm introduction. So you may be sending cold emails direct to people to try and generate interest in your product and open up to a discussion. You may be making cold phone calls where you're literally picking up the phone call, getting on a call, introducing yourself, telling a bit about what you do at seeing a therapist and having a deeper conversation, or it may be a combination of many other things like that as well, including leveraging things like LinkedIn and the likes.
Yeah, okay, great. And I guess for people who are wanting to get into tech sales at the level that you're at, or even, a couple levels below, what does the sort of structure look like? Like, how did you work your way up the ladder? What sort of roles did you have to jump through so they can get a really, I guess, holistic picture of that journey?
Yep. So I think if you're looking to move into tech sales specifically, or SaaS, so software as a service, which is probably a growing industry and a good place to start, which is where I found my feet. Typically, you're going to be wanting to start off with a role that they would call a business development representative. There's many names for it, but they're all essentially the same thing. So it might be a sales development representative, it might be a business development representative, there's a few different things, but anything that sort of ends in something DR typically fits that bill. But it's always important to ask and clarify because there can be some confusing titles in that industry. But basically what that role entails, it's a really good starting point to A, understand the company and the product that you're working for, B, cut your teeth in what can be quite a complex sales process with just exclusively working on the first part of that sales process, which is either cold outreach, generating interest and opportunities for a fully fledged salesperson that you would be partnering with, or B, doing the qualification of any inbound opportunities that might come, being sort of that first point of call, making sure that they're a real prospect and somebody that could realistically buy your product before then passing them along to a salesperson to run that opportunity and close.
So for people out there, when you were in those roles, so what were you in a role like that for, what would you say, 1 to 2 years?
So I did that role with Stackler, which was the marketing product where I sort of first moved into the SaaS world. And then I also did that role with Auth0, which is where I ultimately transitioned into more of a fully fledged salesperson through that career.
And how many cold calls do you think you were doing each day?
It's hard to put a finger on it, and there's many different strategies out there as to sort of how you can be the most successful. There are definitely organizations out there that take a high volume approach where they're just really trying to put an army of people in there to hit absolutely everybody in a target market with cold calls and cold emails and that side of things. There are other strategies which I sort of subscribe to, which I think are much more effective, which is more of a targeted outreach strategy, where you might pick 10 or 20 accounts that you'll focus on for 2 weeks or a month, and you'll try and really understand those accounts and reach out to the right people in those accounts to then have relevant conversations because you've already qualified that they're potentially the right people to speak to and the right companies that would get value out of your product. So I subscribe more to that model. And in that scenario, it's less about making 100 cold calls a day, and it's more about really getting to know your target accounts and making those valuable calls where possible. So, probably anywhere from 10 to 20 a day, sometimes 40 or 50 if it's a busy day. Sometimes less. You might be spending a lot of time focusing on doing really relevant emails or researching the companies and that side of things, which is much more exciting in my opinion than just working through a cold call list and just hitting the phones nonstop.
Okay, perfect. And so obviously, we're all wanting to move up in our career and, get promoted and work up that ladder. How did you go about getting out of that role and stepping into the next one? And what was that next role for you? What did that look like compared to, I guess, those cold emails, cold calling, just that really, I guess, bare outreach?
Yeah, so for context, the role that I worked, I was the first, given that I had some experience doing the role, that probably helped me get that role with Auth0, which is where my career sort of really developed. I was actually the first one running that facility within the Australian region, which meant that I covered off both sides of those coins, so cold outreach as well as warm inbound qualification, working in partnership with 2 account executives. So what also came along with that was exposure to a lot of other areas because it was an early stage company. We were new to the market. I helped out with marketing. I helped out with other activities and that side of things, which is quite exciting. And that helped me develop my skill set. Ultimately, I had my eyes set laser focused on moving into an account executive role, which for those that don't know, is typically a salesperson who focuses exclusively on generating and closing new business opportunities. Those opportunities could come from cold outreach like I was doing, or it could come from inbound qualification, but they're not current. You're not working with current customers, which can be quite a jump from that role. There's no line there that there's a whole bunch of new skills you need to learn in order to effectively run a full sales cycle versus just opening up the doors in that initial interim with the skills that you learned as a sales development representative. I actually was lucky enough to have a bit of a mentor in my sales director, and given it was a small organization, I got to spend a lot of time with him. He sort of coached and helped guided me towards the understanding that maybe it would be a better route for my skill development and my career as a whole is to move into an account management role first. So that was the next role that I took out of being a sales development representative. And what that basically entailed was taking ownership of all our current customers within the Asia Pacific region, with a focus on driving, you know, success with those customers, things like making sure they're using the product correctly, making sure they're utilizing all of the licenses that they've purchased, and helping, generally run that account with support from more technical resources that manage those customers as well. But also, most importantly, for the sales skills that I was looking to develop, there was a strong focus within that on driving expansion and building revenue and new opportunities within that current customer base. So that was sort of the first opportunity I took outside of just doing the raw cold calling, to get a real understanding of what that full sales cycle looked like, albeit with much warmer conversations because they were already paying customers about product.
Okay, great. And we talked to, I guess, a few people and sort of advised, I guess, a similar situation, find a mentor, but it sounds like you had a pretty good boss who already had that instilled in, I guess, his plan for you. So you said you wanted to get into more of that account executive, and then you pivoted to the account management due to some conversations with your boss at the time, or manager, or whatever you want to coin it. Were you the one who brought up those conversations initially, or did he take the incentive to say, hey, look, this is what I'm thinking?
No, I'd say it was a bit of a two-way street, but I think it's very important, particularly as in any sort of sales role, is to be vocal about where you want to be, and the skills you want to learn, and the path that you want to take with your career. As I was evaluating working for that company, Richard, who was the name of the person who I'm referring to, he really impressed me in terms of his approach to the team that he fosters and how he likes to mentor and focus on growth and development. So there was always an open conversation ongoingly throughout my time in that role around where I want to go next and what roles would open up within the business next. Because it's not necessarily on my timeline. We were building out a region, we had to wait for headcount to open up and that side of things. So there was actually an account executive role opened up, and I got looked over for it because he recommended I wait until we decide to launch the account management business in Australia, which had previously been run out of the US.
And
So ongoing conversations across the board, making him aware of where I wanted to be, what skills I wanted to learn, and his feedback on where I am, where he felt I was, and where the gap was between where I needed to be.
So it sounds like obviously you took that feedback really well. Was it, I guess, at the time for you a bit disappointing because you had the eye on that account executive to hear that feedback, or were you more, I guess, okay, I'm going to take on this constructive criticism and sort of work towards it? How did it sort of, obviously hindsight's a beautiful thing. Now you can look back and be like, hey, I'm totally glad I did it this way and that way.
Yep.
But at the time, how did you sort of rationalize, I guess, that disappointment of your mentor and your boss going, hey, I don't think you're quite ready for this yet. Why don't we pivot to this?
Yep. No, you're quite right there. It was a bit of a tough pill to swallow, but ultimately it was the right decision, I feel, for why I've been so successful in my career since then, and the skill set that I have today to lean on in any role I take moving forward. So it was definitely a bit of a tough pill to swallow, but I've always worked with, one of the core things that you like to get out of any role you're working with is considering what sort of growth and development opportunities are there out of that, and taking that sort of growth mindset. And understanding that maybe if I had jumped straight into that account executive role, which many people definitely do, I might have suffered somewhat and been not as successful as I had been. And you never know where that might go in the sales industry if you're not hitting quotas and targets, because I've never done it before. I eventually sort of came to the understanding that, I'll sort of swallow my pride down and think about the long term, and it definitely paid off.
Perfect. And I guess for people who are looking to get into sales and, getting to where you are, how tough would you, because obviously I've worked in sales as well, how tough do you think people need to be with dealing, I guess, with not just, progressing in their career and getting knocked back, but actual rejection in the job itself? Because cold calling or just reaching out to accounts, you've got sales targets to hit. Are there any sort of techniques or advice that you have to overcome some of those boundaries?
Yep. So I guess inside of, if we take a look first at rejection around the role, things like cold calling and losing opportunities and so on and so forth, I think the most important thing to take forward, and from, I guess, it's sort of a mindset perspective when you're working in sales, is always to take it on the chin. Nothing is personal. you're just doing your job, and you're never going to win every opportunity or close every phone call and get a meeting booked or anything like that. So just remove the ego completely and just dismiss it as quickly as you can and move on to the next one, because that's how you're successful, is by focusing on what's real and letting go of what's wasting your time, right? And putting time, energy, and sort of mental headspace into getting stressed about somebody hanging up on you on a cold call or losing an opportunity is just not going to be valuable. So try and take more of a stoic perspective in that area, I think would be the words of advice there, because you're going to come up against it constantly. And over time, as you live experiencing, you just become somewhat immune to it. And then, this happens, move on to the next one, which is the best attitude to have. So you put your best foot forward, but it's never going to be 100% success rate every time. Sorry, go ahead.
No, I was going to say that all sounds that sounds really good. The thing I was going to touch on there was, I guess, for people who are a bit, like, I want to get into sales. I think I'm going to be better on that account management side, where I've already got, a whole bunch of accounts, and I can just service and do customer service and retention and upselling. And they don't want to do any of the cold calling or any of that sort of stuff. Have you seen, because obviously you're going to have colleagues and friends in sales, have you seen them take any steps to get into that account management role without having to go into that cold business development first?
Yeah, so there are various different pathways, and there's different companies will have different roles and functions in that account management, customer management space that can fit better to people that are more sales orientated or more customer management and relationship orientated. So if you're trying to avoid sort of having current quotas being driven by the need to drive expansion and that side of things, maybe a business that is very growth orientated and is looking for an account manager, it may not be the right fit for you, but it could be. I would recommend you definitely take an interview and ask the right questions to try and understand what are the expectations of the person in that role. A lot of the times you may find that a better fit for somebody like that would be a customer success manager, which, while having some level of requirements around driving renewal and adoption, typically isn't the person that's wholly responsible for driving expansion and building the revenue from those customers. It's more about ensuring those customers are happy, solving their problems, and keeping a strong relationship so that they ultimately utilize the product as much as possible and renew at the end of their contract and open up the opportunities for expansion that maybe somebody else would work on. So it's more of an organic sort of service role. In terms of getting into that, probably just before I go on, there is one other role that, if you're technically orientated, can be a really good fit. And there's a few different pathways for how you might go into each of those. In the software as a service industry, there's the idea of something called a technical account manager, which is a person that I partner with in my role as an account manager. And what their role is to act as, typically they're there when you're working with quite technical products, right? So they're the person that would help you sell, but they don't carry the quota. They're your support resource from a technical perspective, and they also manage the ongoing technical relationship with the customer. So solving any challenges that they may have around utilizing the product, if it's beyond something that's on a high level that's not very technical, more business orientated, will be able to do so. So there are a few different options in terms of where you can go from that. On the technical side, I've seen colleagues that came up from a support function, working in sort of like a support team that just manages low-level customers and solves tickets and that side of things, putting their experience, their skill set, and eventually moving into more of a strategic technical account manager. And ultimately, some of those guys have gone in to become solutions engineers, which is more of a new business-focused version of that role. And they've been quite successful. And I think that's definitely a valid path to technically orientated. On the customer success side, some people might take you in straight away, or you may have account managed experience from other industries that might make you a appealing candidate to move straight into a customer success management role. I think it's really about sort of building and highlighting the skill sets you have there, shield to somebody that's looking to hire that role. And if it's not the sales focused role, like I said, you want to have a skill set that comes from working with customers, building relationships, but not necessarily hitting quotas and that side of things, which make it more into that growth account manager focused role or a new business function.
Awesome. That's a great overview. I think what would be good as well is maybe you and I can sort of talk through, I guess, a real life example so people can really picture it. So let's say, for example, the company's Zoom. They would have yourself as the salesperson going out to pitch to Zoom to say, hey, these are the pricings and the packaging that we have that we think is going to suit your business and your business needs or user case. And then
Yep.
you would bring that technical person alongside you in case they had any questions, let's say around, well, how is this going to integrate into our systems and our current ecosystem? Is that correct?
Yeah, that would be very fair to say. And what you're describing there is more of a new business function. So you have an account executive like myself that's focused on new business, and what they call a sales engineer or a solutions engineer, which is more new business focused, but the new business version of that technical account manager. But ultimately, in that scenario, to sort of reiterate what I said before, whilst the sales engineer carries a quota, the person that's ultimately responsible for it is the account executive. They're sort of the quarterback of that operation.
And then the customer success manager comes in once the sale and the client is all agreed, and they actually help with the onboarding of that client and then work with that other technical person who's not necessarily the salesperson, correct?
Correct. Yes. Yeah. And it runs differently in a lot of businesses. So some may have one or two, or they may have a combination of the both. At Horse Zero, we had an account manager and a technical account manager. We did actually originally just have account managers and customer success managers, but because of the nature of our product, we realized that we needed somebody that was more technical than a generalist customer success manager. So we removed that function and put in an account manager. So any other business, just speaking to the types of products they sell, there's going to be a different combination of those roles.
Yeah, okay, great. So those ones, not as salesy, but still very heavy on that customer engagement side.
Yep.
Even more so, I guess, like you said, you're building that relationship, servicing them, making sure that they get that renewal. Would you ever
Yep.
work?
Probably just one thing to add before you ask a question there. The other role that you may want to consider is sort of a bridge into one of those roles, like a customer success manager or an account manager. Some organizations do have I don't know what the exact title would be in generically, but basically somebody that does the implementations or onboarding. So bringing on new customers, and they have a set role, typically in larger organizations where there's a lot of velocity of new sales coming up, new customers coming on board, where their role is to get the customer up and running with a platform, teaching them how to use it, that side of things. And that could be a good pathway into maybe overall customer success, or there's potentially a career you can make out of that as well.
And that's why, and please correct me if I'm wrong on this, and that's why you sort of see, like you said before, a lot of people who go into those technical roles have come from that onboarding or implementation or customer success management roles, because they're working with the product day in, day out, dealing with all the issues that the customers may have, so they really get to know it inside and out. Is that correct?
That's fair to say. Probably the only caveat to that would be whether that person is technically orientated or more business orientated. They could come from either of those roles depending on their background and their interests and their capacity. They could go into a technical account manager role, or a customer success role, or an account manager, a standard account manager role. You may have one of the two in the business, and it can be quite a challenge unless you're many people have done it before, to come from that business side and move into a technical account manager role at certain organizations, because depending on the complexity of the product they're selling requires a lot of understanding of the innate workings of the development tools and that sort of things.
Yeah. Okay, great. All right, fantastic. That's some really good insights there. And for yourself, you were at Auth Zero, and then it got merged into Okta for about 5 years, and you had quite a few promotions within that time. We've spoken to quite a few other people, and we also recommend as well, is, I guess, in order to move up, sort of swimming in another lane. So what we mean by that is you're probably doing 80% of your job that you're doing now, you're trying to get that done throughout your day, and then the other 20% you're focusing on upskilling into those new skill sets, so you can go into that other role. Is that what you were doing in yours, or how did you really get those promotion after promotion if people actually look at your career journey?
Yeah, of course, that definitely played a role. Like if I take my transition from the sales development manager, representative, which is sort of that prospecting side of things, or new business cold calling side of things, because it was a small company, I wore many hats and I helped out with a lot of things. So many a time, prior to me launching the account management function in Australia, it was run out of the United States. So I would jump in and help out if there was any local presence needed and that sort of things to sort of cut my teeth and make sure, hey, I can do this. I'm to be worthwhile considering me when we do open that role up here, or helping out with marketing activities and that sort of things. I think it's always valuable and quite frankly to me much more exciting when you're getting abreast of many different responsibilities within your organization rather than just doing the same thing day in and day out. It can be very successful, and a lot of sales guys do that. But in terms of growth and development in the early stage of your career, I think getting exposure to much of it and putting your hand up for as many things as possible definitely helped accelerate that process. And then in terms of moving from the account management role to a fully new business focused account executive and beyond from there, definitely just being vocal about where I wanted to be, being quite successful definitely helps there. I had a really good track history of getting given a target and building a strategy around how I can achieve that and overachieve that and sort of implementing that strategy. And even if you don't hit all your targets, being showing people that you're quite strategic in the way you're approaching it and being experimental and learning from mistakes and that sort of things definitely helps demonstrate that you've got the capacity to grow and keep pushing until you do crack the code. And that, I think, played a big role in my sort of those opportunities becoming available to me.
Okay, great. I've got a couple of questions on that. The first one might put you on the spot a bit. You talk about being strategic and strategy quite a lot. I mean, can you break that down? Like, what do you define as strategic in that context?
Yeah, so it's going to be different for every role, right? But it's about, rather than just jumping into a new role and thinking, all right, how's everyone else doing it? I'll just repeat their process that's going, all right, what is breaking it down from your top level target? So if you look at a sales role, for example, your target might be close $1 million worth of revenue every year. And taking that down and being strategic about how am I going to get there, right? What are the tools and the tasks and the activities that I need to do on a weekly, monthly, quarterly basis in order to achieve the goals that I've set out? So rather than just going, yeah, I'm just going to keep working opportunities till I get there, it's going, all right, let's be strategic about this. Okay, if I've got to get $1 million in revenue and the company's average sale is $50,000, I need to close 20 sales this year in order to hit my targets. All right, how am I going to close 20 sales? Okay, let's think about that strategically. Pair it backwards, go, well, if I have 10 meetings, how many of those do I think based on previous performance or industry statistics are going to turn into actual opportunities? And how many of those opportunities are actually going to turn into actual closed won opportunities where I've brought in revenue for the business? And taking that and extrapolating out to really understand, all right, well, what do I need to be doing on a weekly basis to be confident that I'm putting in the activities that I need to be able to hit my targets? So maybe that works out that, okay, I need to have 3 meetings a week to generate 10 meetings a month, 10 opportunities a month or something like that. And, sort of working back strategically from there and then taking your lens out and going, all right, how am I going to get those opportunities? Where are they going to come from? What are the activities I need to do? What is the support I need from things like marketing and other resources and building a sort of strategic approach to how you're going to achieve those targets rather than just saying, yeah, I'm going to close $100 this quarter.
Yeah, very smart. And throughout all of that, I mean, that seems like a lot of responsibility, a lot of, I guess, you'd have to have a lot of confidence in yourself to be able to go, well, this is my plan and this is what I'm going to do. Did you reach out to your manager or a mentor or somebody else in the business and go, hey, this is my plan, and sort of validate your thinkings? Or did you just wing it and go, hey, this sounds like a solid plan, I'm just going to go for it?
Yeah. So I'd say most definitely I did. I was lucky enough to be a part of an organization that really fostered team learning, team growth, team, whatever you want to call it. But every quarter, I would put together a plan that aligned to an annual plan and present it to my director and my colleagues and get their feedback. And the important thing there is that every quarter I would review the performance from last quarter, see where I missed the bar, see what was successful, and how can I interpret that to drive better performance in the next quarter, what learnings can I take from that? And running through and reviewing that process on a quarterly basis is important. If you are in an organization where there's that sort of culture, I would say it's, try and just do it anyway, build it out for yourself and see if you can find a colleague or another salesperson that's growth minded and thinks the same way as you did and just do them together. That's definitely a viable strategy as well to keep yourself honest and keep yourself accountable for what you said you want to do, even if the organization isn't keep asking for those sort of things.
Yeah, great. And you also touched on there that you're working with, I guess, external teams as well, from marketing through to onboarding, implementation, which, you know, I think a lot of people need to consider if they're getting into sales, that there are a lot of different stakeholders and teams that you need on your side, because you're not going to be the only salesperson that they're dealing with and trying to push forward, I guess, their clients. Did you do anything in particular to strengthen those relationships, or like you said, was it just already inbuilt into the culture that you had that really collaborative feeling already?
Yeah, there's definitely a collaborative culture. And I'd say if you're ever interviewing at organizations, it's almost a buzzword nowadays, but make sure that they can demonstrate to you that they have a collaborative culture, which is pretty common nowadays. That seems to be the way a lot of these businesses are run. But I would say don't just expect people to do things for you, you know. Obviously they're there to help you with certain scenarios and for you to lean on, but always just be nice about it, make friends, you know, involve them in your wins. Don't just ask them for something and then when you go and close a big deal, say, yeah, look what I did, you know, thank them and mention them in any sort of reviews that you might do for the support they've got, and see what you can do to help them, try and foster that sort of two-way street and build a you know, I don't want to say friendship. Sometimes it can be a friendship, sometimes not, but build that mutual respect of each other and each other's time, and don't just sort of go, yep, I need this, thanks, move on with your day. Yeah.
Yeah, I love how you've touched on that, because I think if people haven't been in sales and are looking to get into it, it is a very because as we touched on before, sales can be very difficult when you're getting knocked back and, you know, you're getting rejections from clients. So they really celebrate the wins and they celebrate together. When I worked in recruitment, for example, every time you did a deal, you went up in the office and you hit a gong in front of everyone and everyone cheered. And then you sort of talked about how you got there. By the sounds of it, it seems pretty similar to what you've had in sales. But I think you really touched on a really important thing there, is that it's not just you who got, without those other people, you probably wouldn't have either got the sale or got it as quick as you would without them. So mentioning and giving them a shout out is huge, because a lot of salespeople don't do that. And then a lot of people in the background go unheard, and it can cause a bit of toxic environment.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. I think probably the best way to think about it is, right, is as a salesperson, you're not the one that's directly responsible for winning an opportunity. You're a captain or a quarterback of a team of people that are involved in that process. You may lead the process, you may hit the big commission, you may take the glory to some degree, but you didn't do it all by yourself, and you need to recognize that people are involved. And to that point, one of the things that will make you a successful salesperson is understanding how to work with people, get them involved, and drive everybody towards a core goal. You're the one that's leading that process, so you need to be aware of that.
Yeah,
And have the ability to drive that.
And I guess now sort of going back to sort of your career journey. So you were at All Zero, Okta, 5 years, multiple promotions. It was all sort of moving up. And then, as you mentioned, you decided to leave, take a bit of time off, and then go into another business. For people who are in a business and have been there for a while and might be a bit afraid of moving, I guess, what made you make that decision? And were you scared to make that leap and leave an organization that you'd been for so long?
That's a good question, right? So I guess my journey is a little bit unique, given that I was part of one business until the point that we were acquired by another. So I almost changed organizations without being the one to make the decision for that change. Does that make sense?
Yes, yeah. As
Yeah.
in, your company was absorbed by a much larger company, and then you're having to adopt, I guess, their new culture. They might have different products, they might have different
Yep.
team structures. So
Different
it was
sales
basic.
processes,
Yeah.
sales culture. Yeah. Yeah, so 100%. So look, I don't know negative feelings about Okta, which is the organization that acquired Auth0, but they are two very different organizations. So that was part of the reason why I left. They weren't the type of organization that I wanted to work for, simply because I, as a person, have a preference for working for smaller scale businesses that are in their growth phase, and working with smaller teams that I can be more impactful in. Okta has a great product. They service a lot of businesses around the world, and do a great job at it. But they're a very large organization. They're listed on the US stock exchange. They've probably got 5 to 10,000 people globally. When you move from an organization where I was one of 600, and within that, one of maybe towards the end where we got the acquisition, one of 40 people in Australia, it's very different to joining an office that's got 300 people and 80 of them are salespeople. So that my role changed quite drastically. The types of products I was selling changed because they want us to sell my product and their product, and the people I was working with changed as well. So I just decided that after the sort of long time that I'd been at Auth0, while very, very exciting and something that I look back on now in my career, I was ready to take a break and think about what I want to do next.
Yeah. Okay.
But
That
it
makes
was,
complete
it was very hard to pull the trigger. I can tell you that.
Yeah.
Because it's always a little bit scary when you leaving an organization, particularly in my case where I left without moving into another role. So I took time off with nothing sort of concrete for me to move on to.
And did you lean on anyone to help make those decisions when you were looking to move, or did you sort of just come to the conclusion yourself and go, look, I don't need any external forces here. This is what I'm going to do.
I definitely sounded out the idea with friends and family, to some degree with some colleagues that I know were in a similar space. We all went through the same experience, and a lot of them did similar things to what I did in terms of either going off to work on something themselves or joining other organizations because the new organization wasn't quite where they wanted to be. So definitely had conversations, but at the end of the day, it's got to be your decision. Nobody can tell you whether it's the right thing to do or not. And with that being said, I have many colleagues that stayed there and are still there to this day. Right? So there's different avenues. You just need to think about what's right for you.
Yeah, great. And then this is going to be a really interesting sort of part that I wanted to ask was, obviously you took about a year off. How daunting was it for you to get back into your job search? How did you start from scratch again? Talk us through that process.
Yeah, very daunting to say the least. I left in a very different economy to the economy when I decided to move back into sales and in software and security, cybersecurity. So my salary expectations had to be mitigated somewhat because the market had changed quite dramatically from a hiring perspective. When I left, businesses were growing. There was lots of investment. The economy was booming, both internationally and locally. So that opened up a lot of high value opportunities. Whereas when I decided to come back in, it was more in a bit of a downturn of economy. Interest rates are rising. Companies are cutting costs that they're putting towards new headcount and that side of things. So it definitely took a little bit longer than I thought it would to find a role that I really liked. By that point, I had enough experience to be quite picky about where I wanted to work and the type of role I wanted to take on board, and the type of people I wanted to work with. So I was being quite strategic there from that aspect. So I might have found a role quicker if I had been less strategic. But it's definitely daunting and intimidating, and couple that with the fact that it had been 6 years since I'd joined a new company or started a new role, trying to flesh out what was going to be a good fit for me off the base of interviews was, it was a tough process, but ultimately, taking my time, being strategic, and asking all the right questions throughout an interview to help me really understand what the potential role would look like in the company culture and that side of things led me to planning a role that suited.
Yeah, great. And you spoke, you could take the time to sort of assess what the right role was for you. And I love how you touched on the fact of how you sort of found that out was asking the right questions in the interview process. Now, for you, and so this can sort of paint a picture for other people as well, what were the sort of questions that you asked to identify whether or not that was the right business for you?
Yeah, so that's a really good question. And, if it helps, I can send you through a list of questions that I ask on every interview for you to share with anybody that might be valuable to. But it's important, particularly in a sales role, to ask lots of questions. It demonstrates your skills as a salesperson, because that's basically what you're hired to do in discovery processes and that side of things. So if you can't ask good questions and relay relevant questions and feedback as part of an interview process, you sort of telling yourself short. So I would always recommend that you spend at least 40% of the time on an interview asking questions, if not more. It shouldn't be you speaking the whole time. And the type of questions I'm asking to try and understand is basically, I'm interviewing them as much as they're interviewing me. So I want to know, why are they still at the company? Why did they join the company? What have they found to be the biggest challenges since they've joined the company? What does the performance of their sales team look like? What are the type of skills and attributes that their most successful sales members have demonstrated, and why have they been successful? What are the expectations of the role, and what are they looking to get out of the long term in this role? What are the growth and development opportunities? All those sort of questions to try and get understanding of, really, what does the role look like in as much detail as I can bestly understand? What one day-to-day look like? Who will I be selling to? What types of products will I be selling? Those sort of things. What is the expectation of me? Quotas and everything that comes with that bit. Anything outside of quotas, and how is the team performing? You want to join a high performance culture rather than a sales culture where no one's hitting targets. It's just generally isn't a good environment to be in. And maybe that may not be the salespeople's fault in a lot of scenarios. Some people get set unrealistic targets. So don't, take that with a grain of salt. And then outside of that, what's the culture like for the organization? Are they growth orientated? Are they collaborative? Who are you going to be working with? How do they like to work with each other? And that side of things. And then probably the most important thing for me, particularly if you're early in your career, is trying to identify who you're going to be working with or working for in the form of a manager or director, and are they sort of oriented towards growth and enablement, and will they take time to help you grow in your role and give you feedback and support you from that side of things? Because those are the type of people you want to be working for if you want to have a good career, in my opinion.
Amazing. Love how you touched on, it's not just them interviewing you, you're interviewing them as well. That's so key. And all the questions you just said then were fantastic. So thank you so much for that insight. I'm conscious of time. Thank you so much for going through your career journey, giving us those great insights. Awesome to see that you've landed a new role after that year off, and you're happy and thriving where you are. Michael, thanks again for your time. Greatly appreciate it.
No worries. Happy to help and happy to have the conversation and share what may be helpful.
Legend. Thank you.
No worries.